You're listening to All Kinds of Catholic with me, Teresa Alessandro. My conversations with different Catholics will give you glimpses into some of the ways we're living our faith today. Pope Leo, quoting St. Augustine, reminds us, "Let us live well, and the times will be good. We are the times." I hope you'll feel encouraged and affirmed, and sometimes challenged, as I am in these conversations. Join our podcast community, get news and background information about the conversations, and share your thoughts if you want to. You can get the newsletter and each episode straight to your inbox by going to allkindsofcatholic.substack.com and clicking on subscribe. It's free. That web address is in the episode notes too, and I'd love you to draw closer to our community. Thank you. Listeners, thanks for tuning in today. Just before we get into this week's conversation, I need to just let you know that it is an episode that's quite hard-hitting. We're talking about drug addiction and suicide and also abortion, so in some parts it's a pretty tough listen. But there's also a lot of light and truth and God himself in this conversation, so I hope you will find it encouraging and not without hope. Let's hear from Ali now. Listeners, thanks for joining this week's pod episode. I've got a very interesting guest today in Ali, who's going to talk about some dark times in her life. And we're very privileged to hear directly from someone with lived experience of these things and how faith has helped Ali to lift herself out of that darkness. So welcome, Ali.
Hi, Teresa. Thank you.
So I think I'm right in saying you're someone who's not always been a Catholic, and actually something about this darkness that you experience has brought you to faith. Would that be fair?
It would. I was baptised a Catholic when I was younger. And I was taught in the church. We came from a very Irish family, but I suppose my faith when I was younger wasn't really a faith. It was more like having imaginary friends. And I don't think it was a real living God in my life. I don't think I really believed it to that extent. It was imaginary friends.
Okay. And then can you give us some idea of how your life went astray? Was there something that you can think it was because this happened? It was gradual. What went wrong for you?
I think I started becoming an addict probably at quite a young age. I think most addicts have this thing where the devil tells them a lie from the start of their lives. And that lie could be, you're not loved. It's always a sort of original lie in your soul to say, your family don't love you. You're not worthy. You're not good enough. It'll be something like that. He'll warp and the devil will twist something in your childhood. And that will be your sort of narrative for life. So I went into my life not feeling worthy enough, not feeling loved. I had very low self-esteem. And that was the original lie that the devil told me, because of course I was loved. I was loved by God. I was created by God.
And so you became an addict. And was that something that, to start with, you felt this was a good thing, that it was, you were feeling more alive? I think sometimes people say about drug taking and alcohol that you feel more sociable, you feel more confident. Yeah. Is that how it began?
The first drug I really, really was addicted to was ecstasy. And Teresa, they don't call it ecstasy for nothing, because it puts you into that ecstatic state that you hear the saints talk about, but it's the devil's mimicry of ecstasy that you'd see the saints going through. And the reasons that you take ecstasy, this was back in the 90s, and the reasons you take ecstasy is to feel unity with people, to sort of find your tribe, to find that love that you're missing, or you think you're missing. And it does connects people, but it's not authentic, Carlo Acutis says that our hearts are created to love, and when it's authentic, it sets it free. And I really like that, because ecstasy is like being in fake heaven, I think. And it literally twists your brain, and you're surrounded by people who probably are as insecure as you, who never really felt like they fitted in. It's kind of like the addict's mantra. We all feel like that. That was the first time I ever really I thought I'd found the answer, to be honest, to any bad feeling I'd had.
That's really interesting, Ali. I can really see what you're saying there. And I'm thinking, gosh, a faith community can give you that sense of belonging and shared understanding of our faith and a kind of grounding and something that is real and authentic. And, I'm really interested in you recognizing it later as a fake experience. I guess there are some people for whom it doesn't become a really serious problem, some drug taking. This is what I hear. I don't have any experience myself, but I hear that, for some people, it is a phase that they're able to move on from in some way. But that wasn't what happened for you, I'm guessing.
No, and quite a lot of other people, because there's still people now my age, at 46, who are trying to carry on that party from the 90s. And because I've been in that scene still, I can see them and they're desperate, and it's really not the same anymore. The ecstasy stops working after a while, as with everything fake. And then people have moved on, including myself, to more harder drugs like cocaine. I would have taken anything. I suppose it progressed with me when I had to leave a marriage because of domestic abuse. All that pain and everything, I was suddenly alone with it. And I was alone with my children and everything. And I got myself into a new relationship, which is a really bad idea, and with not a very nice person. It was kind of repeating that sort of, also, drugs are almost self harm, and relationships can be addictively self harm too. And codependency is very much linked with addiction. And with this person, I suppose the deciding moment where I really, really, really started taking a lot of cocaine, a lot of ketamine. Then after that, anything else I could get my hands on, including alcohol, obviously I was drinking the whole time too, was I had to have an abortion because of this man, because he was so bad, I suppose, that I had to have an abortion. And after that, I feel like the sort of, it's more self-harm, isn't it? It's more destroying your body, and this time it was destroying my own child, that really brought me to my knees, I think. And after that, I don't think I went a day without cocaine after that, or without ketamine after that, or without alcohol.
A very dark place.
And I didn't know it. I didn't actually know it. Like, I didn't realize how dark it was until I look back now.
My heart goes out to you hearing about it, Ali, but you somehow have come through that, and we'll hear a bit more about that. But just, you were saying to me before we started recording, just give us some idea of this world of being addicted then. What is that doing to your brain then? You said that it's only later you can see how dark that time was. How is it that people don't see it when they're in the middle of it?
Because it starts off as fun, you start taking drugs, you start drinking to be sociable, and in the end, you end up sort of like wanting to isolate because you can't actually get on with your addiction in those public places anymore with those people unless they're doing the same things as you are. You sort of gravitate towards the people that are in those dark places and who do take drugs like you do. Do you know my worst nightmare? I think when I was deep in addiction, best idea I could have had would be to go out and party and everything, and this is how it starts. But then actually that became my worst nightmare because what I wanted to be doing was being at home, just snorting line after line of ketamine and cocaine. And I couldn't do that when I was out. So you become very, very isolated in your thoughts, and you just become weird, like sort of like Gollum. And you don't like daylight. Another thing that's really struck me about those dark places and addiction, it starts out as a sociable thing, as a happy thing, and as a way to let go and to be free and maybe get rid of a bit of pain. You end up like isolated on your own, and you end up losing everything. And then there's a shift. There seems to be this shift of where you go deep into that addiction, you become very selfish, very unaware of anything else. It feeds that any kind of defect of character, I suppose, you might have. It feeds into that too. And then you forget about everything else. But it happens so slowly because it starts as a sociable thing, and you only really seek out those dark places with those people who are doing the same as you because you can't cope with anybody else. I think that there's three places you're going to end up, and that's prison, death, or you have to find a spirituality. That's the three choices that we have as addicts because we can't stop.
I was going to say, yeah, it sounds like a very, very long way back to God from there. You've closed so many
Yes.
doors in this pursuit that I think before we started recording, you did use the word diabolical very deliberately about the effect of addiction.
Yeah, it's diabolical. It's like being possessed. The reason I realize that these, especially drugs, is like being possessed is because each drug is quite individual to what it does to you. You kind of sort of end up with everyone else on those drugs. Like ketamine takes you to this sort of very strange place where your head's a bit wonky and you can't be very sociable, but you're all in the same place, just acting weird. I'm looking very weird too. It's like falling over sort of stuff, and everyone's the same on it. And cocaine, it sort of it keeps you awake. You talk, just talk and talk and talk. You can't remember what you've spoken about afterwards. But like everyone's the same on these things. It's very much like being possessed by a different type of demon, I believe, because you're just the same. drugs are very autonomous in what they do to you. So it is really like being a zombie on them. It's right into the devil's hands. It has a diabolical element to it without an absolute doubt.
What happens to family relationships where there are people who might, know you very well and be able to reach out and help you? What happens to those relationships? How are you feeling about family members?
Well, I had a lot of resentments against so many people. The drugs feed into that, of course, because you're sitting there and you're thinking about things, and the way that your brain sort of goes is that everybody else is wrong and you're right. We're sort of, as human beings, we're prone to be like this anyway. But with the help of, I mean, possibly being possessed, like your thoughts are not your own thoughts anymore, and you do end up resenting people. You end up hating people, and I feel like that a lot of addiction is actually fueled by resentment, which is why I'm in a 12-step fellowship, which has led me to the church. And in that, we actually work through our resentments. We look at why we're resentful. We look for our own part in it. It's very holy, really. It's a holy way of dealing with those things. But like relationships with family, I mean, I can tell you that I couldn't talk properly to anyone because I didn't talk the same as I would now. I didn't have any respect for anybody, certainly not myself or anybody else. So I treated people, as a cash machine, maybe sometimes, and I treated people with very little respect. I became a very self-serving person. I had children and I couldn't look after them. I couldn't do the basic things for them. I couldn't get them a dinner. I couldn't get up and take them to school. There's things like that. I mean, those acts of love are care, aren't they? They're care for your children. They're care for your parents. And I couldn't do them, because I had to take the drugs. I had to. Not taking them and getting in the car and taking the children to school was like an impossible task for me. So if you can't do those basic things for your children, then there's no love there.
Thank you, Ali. You've given us a real insight into that really, really terrible time. But our Lord did not abandon you,
No, he did not.
as you indicated there. So tell us, was there one thing that just turned things around for you, or again, was it a sort of gradual process?
It's been quite dramatic, actually. It's been quite dramatic. One thing that happened was that I lost my children, and the social workers took my children. I lost the relationship that I was in because we were both taking drugs. Everything sort of disappeared from underneath me, it was very, very sudden, and all I had left really, I'd wanted to be on my own for such a long time that when I was on my own, I actually didn't like it, and I was very, very alone. Nobody was talking to me. I'd isolated myself from all my friends or just been plain nasty to them. So they didn't want to know me. And I was alone in a house with a drug friend of mine, but like a sort of spare DOS house. And I couldn't go to bed. I was just sleeping. Well, when I could sleep, I was sleeping on the sofa. I was at the stage then, I think, of absolute desperation. I couldn't get any more alcohol down me one night. And I used to puke up foam from ketamine use. Yeah, I was at a point in that house. The only thing I could get down with was cough medicine because it was so gloopy. It kept the foam down. I couldn't get alcohol down me, and I'd actually, because of all this, I'd actually sobered up for the first time in years. And it was very, very, very strange for these things not to work anymore, And I got to a point where I was going to commit suicide actually after my children got taken. But I was too wasted on ketamine to actually go out and get the rope around the tree, and I couldn't walk properly. But I did have all those things ready. So I kind of thank God that that didn't happen. But with addiction, it's one of the only options. You've lost everything. I didn't see any hope in the future. And I think it was the next night that I was sat there and I actually sobered up. And at that point, I received sort of an intervention from God, from my guardian angel. My addiction really was based on hatred. It was based on resentment. It was based on that victim complex I had. I blamed everybody else for the way my life had turned out. I blamed my ex-partner. I blamed my husband from years ago, the abusive husband. I blamed my mother. I didn't think she did a good enough job of bringing me up. I didn't, because I grew up feeling unloved. Poor me, poor me. And I was sat on the sofa and my guardian angel came, and I didn't see my guardian angel's face or anything like that. But I was drawn out of my body by something, and I was shown in pictures, like in a visual way, pictures of the faces of these people whom I hated. And I was shown everything that they'd done for me to try and help me in my life in the different ways, I suppose, that they'd love me and show me care in however capable they were of doing that. Even my ex-husband, the one who was abusive, my ex-partner, who is now my husband now, and my mother, all kinds of people, the ways they tried to help me. And then I was put back into my body again. Now, I wouldn't, like Teresa, I wouldn't have had that thought on my own. It wouldn't be possible. Not in the addict's brain, not in my brain. I don't think in anybody's brain, really, sober or not. I don't think it's possible. So I know that it was an intervention. After that, I signed up for rehab to start on my journey of getting better. And it was probably the one thing I did for me, the one good thing I'd done for me, shall we say. Everything else had been really self-harm to damage me, everything.
Thank you for sharing that, Ali. It's hard to put those kind of experiences into words, but listeners will remember we had some guests at Christmas time talking about their experience of angels that were also hard to describe, but I think there's some visceral way in which we really feel them, and their words are kind of secondary. So it's wonderful that you had that experience and that you began to turn your life around, but I'm guessing it's really hard work from that point on.
Well, Teresa, to be honest, God is good because God can give you the gift of desperation. And it is a gift, like everything in my life was gone. Everything. I had no life, which is why I thought suicide was the answer. But that gift of desperation can take you a very long way. So I went to rehab, and it's very holy, actually, because the 12-step program is a very holy program. It was founded in Christian roots in America in the 1930s. The program really is completely to do with God. And that's where I rediscovered faith in God. And the first time I realized that God definitely existed and was working in my life was when I started doing the steps. Step 3 is a complete surrender of your will in your life to it says higher power. Obviously, mine is God, and most people's is God, or however they understand God, When I surrendered my will and my life over to that higher power, which is God, it's very much the Catholic God, I never ever got the urge to drink or use a drug again, ever.
Wow.
Ever. It's not come back. And this is a person, I couldn't wake up without doing a line of coke. I couldn't sleep without Valium. I couldn't sleep without ketamine. I couldn't live without alcohol. My body was just highly dependent on it, never mind in a mental way, in a very physical way. And what we do, and it's so simple, Teresa, it's so simple. We get on our knees in the morning, and there's a special prayer that we say, which is offering your whole day and your life to God and asking God to direct your thinking, intuitions in every single way. It's like a sort of daily miracle that nobody knows about, I think, in 12-step fellowships, because it happens to everybody. Like it gets literally removed from you. I don't even think about a drink or a drug now, and that's a miracle. That's a bigger miracle than seeing my guardian angel, I think.
It is. That's amazing to hear about, Ali. Thank you for sharing that. I think it reminds us not only is God good, but God is powerful.
Very, very powerful. And God can remove anything, I suppose the next steps in the fellowship is like what I was talking about earlier with the resentments and with all those things. Now, it's not therapy or anything like that, but you have a sponsor and you would go through, your resentments, the harms you've done, all those things. You'd really it's an inventory of your life, and you could begin to see patterns. And I was actually only speaking about this last night at a meeting. The pattern of my life was I wouldn't have done this if this hadn't have happened. That's my pattern. And it's very much an addict's pattern, I think, as well. Or, there's no blame. I couldn't take responsibility for anything. I couldn't take responsibility for the children I had. I couldn't take responsibility for my behaviors or my choices. So it's a very healing process. And it's probably the first time in my entire life I've ever actually taken responsibility for anything, And then after that, you go on to people that you've harmed, you would go on to make amends to those people. And I've had some beautiful experiences doing that too. I know some people don't want to know. Sometimes the best way that you can love someone is by staying away from them. But I've had some beautiful experiences. I've been able to write my children letters. They're older now. And really, really take responsibility for what my part in everything, because they were innocent in that.
Yes. And thank you for capturing that. You still need some judgment there around what's the best way in each different relationship. context,
Yeah.
that there are different things that might be the best way forward, and you can expect people on the other end of that to need time, or
I don't expect anything anymore from anybody. No, gosh, no.
well, maybe that's the most healthy thing.
Yeah, yes. I feel like my life today is lived in daylight, and like Jesus, he was the light. The people that walked in darkness have seen a great light, and I love that psalm. Basically, anything that you do under the cover of darkness, it says this in the Bible too, is something you want hidden, and you do want it hidden. But God is truth, and to be living in truth today is like living in the light. I don't even like being up at night now. Do you know? I don't even like that. I'm that not scared, but aware of how, how much evil can be done. Myself and my husband get up at 3. We ask our guardian angels to wake us up at 3 o'clock to pray for the world. And then we do a divine mercy and go straight back to sleep.
Wow.
And it works. Actually, if anybody wants to do that, if you ask your guardian angel to wake you up to pray at 3, they will.
Okay. Well, that's amazing. I was going to ask a little bit about whether alongside the 12 steps you practice your faith in ways that people in parishes would recognise, whether you go to mass and say prayers that we all say. And it sounds like you're way ahead there of what I was thinking.
I wouldn't say ahead. Experimenting, maybe. My husband, he's in the fellowship too, which is Cocaine Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous, and he got baptized, and he's now a Catholic, and he got baptized at Easter just gone.
Oh,
Since then, we've been going to mass every day, and it's a very recent thing, and it's been fantastic for us to receive the Eucharist every single day. So highly recommend, but it's a new thing for me.
well, many congratulations to both of you. That just sounds like a very powerful testimony.
Another thing I was going to mention was there's fantastic healing in Rachel's Vineyard for those people who've had abortions. Rachel's Vineyard is a very, very Christian organization, and they're a charity, and they do fantastic work. And the healing, the spiritual healing they give you there. I mean, they pray over you. You're spiritually healed and renewed when you go away on their weekend. So if anybody was suffering or they had confused feelings about the abortion they had, I've noticed as well, when we went on the weekend, it's the one sin people confess over and over again because they never feel forgiven.
I'm glad you brought that in, Ali. I'll put a link to that in the episode notes, Rachel's Vineyard, so people can follow up if they're in that situation or know somebody in that situation. Anything else you were hoping to say that we've not had space so far?
Maybe something about truth, because when you're in addiction, everything's a lie from the father of lies. And you end up becoming a liar to hide your addiction, to hide your behaviors around that addiction. You end up in this sort of cycle of absolute dishonesty. And you almost have this fake narrative that you live by. I'm a good mother because, well, I did this. I'm a good person. And actually you're not. You're living this deception. I suppose I'd like to say, like, this living in the light thing that's so important to me now, like even in the physical light, is also living in truth. And I think the program of CA and of AA, it's really about truth. And, one day we'll be standing in front of God with God's truth, and you can't hide from your behaviors then. There's no hiding because God is truth. And to be living in truth and in light now it's more peaceful than any addiction. It's not hard. Like, people seem to think that coming out of addiction is really difficult and you have to suffer every day because, you can't have your drug. It isn't like that. God can remove that. That's just a small thing. And the devil makes it so big. It makes it scary. It's very scary. I can't have my cocaine, or I can't have my cigarette or my drink. It isn't scary at all. With that gift of desperation, it's actually quite simple. God will remove it. That's the problem. Like, where people they're too frightened, because it's their best friend. Like, my relationship really was just with drugs and alcohol. I had this person in my life, my husband now, but the drugs and the alcohol came first. They came before my children. I'd die for my children, but I'd step over them for a line.
Gosh,
That's the sort of position I was in. And it's true.
that's reminded me, Ali, thank you. It's reminded me that if there's people listening who have family members or friends in this situation or in this situation themselves, being in the addiction part of it, is there anything you think would be good for people to hear that they maybe don't realise? I think you've given us quite a lot of insight, actually, but is there anything people can say to help somebody when they're in the midst of that?
I think the best thing that you can do if you have somebody in addiction in your life is help them to get the number of another addict. That's the best thing. Addicts can only help addicts and ex-addicts, if you know what I mean. So someone like me or ring up a 12-step fellowship. There's plenty of numbers out there on the internet. The best thing they can do is get somebody who's in recovery to ring the addict or to try and push them towards a meeting or something, because people outside, I noticed when I was doing my amends that people have no idea how much we can put away. I don't even know how my body was still alive. And it doesn't help when someone doesn't understand you. I think you're very welcome if you get anybody come to you and asking, you're very welcome to give them my details. People in recovery want to help other addicts. Gets us out of our own selfish heads, and put them in touch with some kind of fellowship.
Okay, thank you.
Don't try and tackle it yourself, because people get very defensive. I would have got very defensive if somebody like my mother or somebody well-meaning person said, do you think you should stop cocaine? It would have made me more manipulative and deceptive than ever.
Right. Okay. That's really good advice. Thank you for sharing that. I hope that does help some people. So it's been really wonderful talking to you, Ali. I've learned a lot, and I appreciate you sharing so much about your life and some of those really terrible times. Although some of the things I think you will find challenging, you don't seem to have found challenging, but it isn't easy to expose the things we've done that we wish people didn't know about us. Maybe the terrible choices we've made along the way, and that's all of us made some bad choices somewhere along the way, I'm sure. But to have it all shared across the world on the internet.
The truth will set you free, Teresa. And I don't live in lies and deception anymore. It's my responsibility, I think, to share this with other people. There could be damaged women out there stuck in addiction, abortions. It damages men and women. If you live in your truth and you live in the light, I'm not ashamed of those things because they brought me to Jesus.
Good. Thank you for sharing that truth with us then. I think that's going to touch the hearts of people listening and hopefully help people to help others through that, and for them to find the light too, through you sharing your truth. That's absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for joining me on All Kinds of Catholic this time. I hope today's conversation has resonated with you. A new episode is released each Wednesday, and you can follow All Kinds of Catholic on the usual podcast platforms. Rate and review to help others find it. You can also follow us on social media at Kinds of Catholic. And remember, if you connect with us on Substack, you can comment on episodes and share your thoughts and be part of the dialogue there. Until the next time.